So Macron made a speech at Davos saying that the $300 billion euro that would normally flow to the United States will be reinvested back into Europe to establish their capital market. In other words, they want to tighten capital market controls because that's what this is. It's statism in Europe. It's not free market. So in other words, they want to tighten the grip within Europe, the Eurozone, and they're not investing that money into the United States. They've already, between EU and China, have dumped over $200 billion of US Treasuries, which is actually quite significant. And the reason why they're doing this is, yes, it's true that the United States' debt is out of control, but it's actually a lot worse in other countries. The Eurozone is much worse, and it is orders of magnitude worse in China. China is way over leveraged compared to everybody else. This is an attempt to try to try to force Trump and try to change policy from the United States. See, NATO, if you look at what happened with Greenland, and if you look at the fact that the Trump administration is looking to negotiate with Russia, NATO is really under question. Is NATO a legit military force? Is NATO powerful enough to really keep all the countries in Europe on the same side militarily? Because if it doesn't do that, then you don't have a European Union, because each country is going to have to have their own foreign policy. The EU is not an economic union, it's really a political one. And if all the countries are not on the same side militarily, you don't have a European Union. You can't have, you shouldn't have a currency union without, when you have all these different fiscal policies. We saw what happened after 2008 with Greece and Greece compared to, say, Germany. Germany has much tighter fiscal policy, whereas in Greece, not so much the case, right? And that's why the Eurozone was under so much pressure after 2008. It's going to be a much worse situation if all the countries are not on the same side, because they have to protect themselves militarily, if they have to implement their own policies to negotiate trade deals with other countries, because each country is different. The needs of Germany are very different from the needs of France. Then you can't have a European Union. So they've started selling off US Treasuries, which is bad news, to create pressure in the United States. But keep in mind, any economic problem in the United States is going to be much worse in Europe. It's even worse for China. China needs globalism. And the United States is the engine of globalism. We protect the sea lanes and the rule of law internationally. The United States is the big bulwark behind all that. Without globalism, the Chinese economic model in its current form does not make any sense. In fact, it really doesn't make any sense now because they're so over-leveraged and their population is aging into mass retirement or oblivion. Thanks to one-child policy. But without the United States protecting the sea lanes, they can't sell their cheap stuff anymore. They don't have a young population in China to be able to sell it domestically. And so they are trying to put pressure on the Trump administration. It's going to be much worse in China. I suspect that that there is a big problem in the chain of command in the Chinese Communist Party under Xi. I don't know the specific details, but they made a lot of really stupid decisions, like like flying a spy balloon over the United States. That was just incredibly stupid. It makes no sense. But decisions like that don't make sense from the Chinese standpoint. They've been doing things like this, under Xi. So dumping treasuries is just incredibly stupid for them to do. The solution to all this is to abandon the globalist project and recognize every country needs to recognize that we're into a multipolar world, that China has its own interests. How they deal with it, I'm not exactly sure. Probably make a deal with Russia, but they're too suspicious of Russia. Same thing with Germany. Germany needs to recognize that, hey, the EU is skating on thin ice, and I don't know, maybe make a deal with Russia to acquire natural resources there and to sell it to the European market that they're smack dab in the middle of. Maybe something like that. Just a suggestion. Of course, that makes them, under the Russian system in a sense, which maybe is not the best thing to do. But they shouldn't be moving their industrial base to the United States. Maybe that's not a good move. But that's the thing. These elites are trying to hang on to power. They can't in a system that we're moving into. That is, like I said, a multipolar world. They're just going to have to recognize it as such and abandon their globalist agenda. But they're not doing that. They're trying to put pressure on Trump, which is ultimately not going to work.